So if anybody wants to turn the cameras off, please feel free.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so we will start. So welcome to Supporting Neurodivergent Learners by SHINE. SHINE is called Sharing Student Healthcare Initiative for Neurodiversity and Equity. So this presentation is based on a SHINE presentation that we've got that was created by Ben Potts, one of our co-founders. He's a diagnostic radiographer, newly qualified. He's autistic, dyslexic, and ADHD. And today we have, representing SHINE, myself, Emma Young. I've got dark brown hair, brown eyes. I'm autistic and dyslexic, and my pronouns are she, they, and my name. This is Millie. She'll introduce herself.
Hi everyone, so my name's Millie. I have brown hair, hazel eyes, and my neurodivergent condition is ADHD.
So welcome today. Can I just get a thumbs up that you can hear us all okay? Brilliant.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
So we want to start by just giving a bit of an overview of SHINE's work so far and some of the barriers that neurodivergent learners may be experiencing at the moment, and exploring ways that educators and organisations may be able to support the learners on placement. And we'll then have the group discussion. Please do pop any questions in the chat that you've got. So SHINE was created originally by two members of the 150 Leader Programme, Jade and Ben, and it now has over 20 members from across the United Kingdom. We are all from a range of different allied health professional and nursing professions. So we're truly multidisciplinary. We've got, there's a few that we haven't gotten in there yet. So if you know anyone, but we've got some physios, child nursing, dietetics, paramedics, mental health nurses, speech and language therapists, therapeutic radiographers, diagnostic radiographers, and adult nurses, and some OTs. SHINE have various groups that work together on different projects that we're involved with. There's some larger groups, some smaller groups, some long-term work, and some quick projects. We also get invited to talks such as today and speaking at universities and conferences and doing workshops. So that's part of the main work we do to create and share the resources that we're making. So some of the examples of the things that SHINE have been involved with, there's just a few examples. So we spoke at the College of Paramedics, James was speaking at the RCN, Ben was speaking at Derby and Burton NHS Trust, and Stuart and Chloe spoke at the Southwest AHP Roadshow. A key resource that SHINE's created, along with the old Health Education England, now Workforce Training and Education, is the Guide to Practice-Based Learning for Neurodivergent Students. I don't know if anyone in here, they give a thumbs up if you've seen or used the guide before. It's a best practice guide based on lived experience created by the multidisciplinary team of students we've got involved, that has case studies and best practice examples of how you might approach adjustments or supporting a neurodivergent student that you've got on placement. And from the guide, we're currently developing an e-learning module that's going to build upon this guide and be a bit of an interactive support resource for learners and educators together. And there's also going to be a second edition of the guide, updating some of the language, and I think there's a project group working on a Welsh edition. So why is this all important? There is a social movement at the moment around neurodiversity, and making sure that our workplace cultures, as well as more broadly, are inclusive and I think there's a key driver in healthcare and OT at the moment as well, to make sure that our workforce is representative of the society in which we work. And so it's really important that we can explore how to support our neurodivergent and disabled students on placement. I'm sure you all know a lot about this already, but just to cover some basics. So neurodiversity speaks about the range of diversity across the population as a whole. And if somebody is autistic or has ADHD, they might refer to themselves as neurodivergent because they're a minority group and seen as different to the social norm within that diversity of the whole population. So we find this little image quite useful to get our head around the terminology. It can sometimes be a bit confusing. Statistically, 15 to 20% of the population are neurodivergent. So in the UK, 700,000 autistic people, 2.6 million ADHD, and over 6 million dyslexic. So it's really important, you know, neurodivergent learners will become neurodivergent staff and workforce and colleagues. And I'm sure there's many of us out there. So please do chip in with your own experience as well in the chat. We'd love to hear from everybody. I'm just going to play this video that just talks a little bit about the difference between equality and equity.
There's no sound. I'm not sure if there's meant to be.
Oh, okay. You didn't get sound?
I could hear it. So.
I could hear it. Yeah.
I could.
Okay, I'll carry on.
Okay.
Lily, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about the slide there. I think.
Yeah, no, I think, well, I think it just sums it up. The video it's lovely, as we've said before, haven't we, Emma? But I think it's just, we were saying it, recognizing that we just having that simple, reasonable adjustment can make all the difference to that individual. So yeah, I think this video sums it up beautifully.
Because yeah, often a lot of the things that we'll experience will be invisible to the eye of our practice educator, and it can really add up and have that impact. So just making sure that it's not giving students an unfair advantage, it is really addressing those hidden impacts that can really add up. Okay. So just looking at a couple of barriers that can be quite key and important to know about. At the moment, waiting lists and disclosure and self-discovery. We're just going to go a little bit into these. So identification is quite common during the university studies. So it may be that somebody's coming from school and just in a new environment or a placement, they're actually realizing they're neurodivergent and going through the diagnostic process. It may be that somebody's been having a second career and going back to academia. They have access to more of these resources and assessments, and they realize they're neurodivergent. So it can be something that is happening alongside the diagnostic process, alongside studying. And because the waiting lists are so long at the moment, a student might not actually have support in place during their studies. I don't know, Millie, if you wanted to say anything about your experience there.
Yeah, so I actually just recently, it's been a year since I received my diagnosis, when I was in my second year at university. And it's not only the unknown of always knowing that there was something different about myself, but then having to explore all these different characteristics that you're then having to unpick, but also trying to juggle that university and also being a mum, and transitioning between the three alongside it. So it's quite a challenging and a time of trying to sort of get that self-recognition of this new diagnosis and where you are and how this is going to affect you long term. But actually, the more you explore, you realize actually it's got its positives and its negatives associated with it. So yeah, at the time it can be quite a stressful period of trying to source which avenues you take and the support you require, and getting that in place.
Yeah, and it can be quite a destabilizing time. And I think even for those who maybe have had a diagnosis for a long time, it can take quite a while to access the support through DSA. So for example, it took me about a year to set that up because it was just quite bureaucratic and confusing. So what you guys can do is that if you are putting in place support that is above what you would normally be doing to adjust to people's learning styles, and somebody doesn't have a diagnosis or hasn't disclosed to you, it's really important to be seeking, if you're seeing that they're struggling, seeking support from the universities and having conversations early, because the worst thing is to get to the last day of the placement and give tons of feedback and not give that student the chance to grow and explore and learn with you. So that's what we'd say. Yeah, just really seek support if you're not sure, if you're thinking something's going on, and you're putting in place things that you're starting to worry there might be something else going on. As well as this disclosure, so isolation and stigma can lead to challenges around disclosure. There unfortunately is still a lot of misunderstanding around certain neurodivergent conditions, and there can be a secondary impact on the student's mental health. So psychological safety whilst you're holding that placement support is really important. It's so fundamental that the student feels safe with you, that you give them opportunities to disclose and to discuss their learning needs, whilst also respecting the boundaries, because it's not, students aren't obliged to disclose their condition, but obviously we do know if students can disclose, often they receive better support or more appropriate support, and you can start to have those conversations together. So it's we'd really encourage trying to make those spaces where students can communicate with you. Self-discovery. Your placement environment is likely to be a new environment for your student or your learner. They may be away from their normal home, their typical support strategies and support networks. So for example, I do yoga classes regularly in the week to help me regulate. But if I'm on a placement that I can't go to my class, I might be looking for an alternative way to get that movement input, because I need that to be able to regulate. So as well as being in a new environment, I'm also having to work out a new support strategy. So it's really useful when the educator can be aware of the bigger picture of what might be affecting that student. Do they need help to adjust their support strategies? Finding that sense of belonging in a new team is difficult for everybody starting a new job. So just having that awareness that your student, it's like the first day of work, like you're starting in a new team. So having compassion around that, to know that we're all trying our best and we're all growing and learning together. Millie, I don't know if you wanted to add anything on that slide, or if we're good to...
Is it the next slide that's got about supervision? Because I was going to add about supervision.
Oh yeah, that's a bit later, yeah.
Ah, okay.
Emma, we're halfway through.
Fab, thank you. Oh yeah, you were going to say about this one, weren't you?
Oh, so the reason we decided to keep this slide in, and we felt it was really important, because often I've experienced it myself, that with exactly what Emma said, all these different encompassing things we're having, all these different challenges, and trying to work out new strategies, we do find ourselves often constantly apologizing for saying, oh, you know, for example, oh, sorry, I'm having to take notes for this, or oh, sorry, can I just ask for you to repeat that again? And it can be very fatiguing, and then you experience like the boom and bust cycle. And it in itself, having, for example, ADHD is fatiguing enough, and then when you're on placement, it expends even more of your energy and your concentration, and it's just being able to, you know, as I say, recognize that, you know, these performance components, if there's just those reasonable adjustments in place, it just makes us then, like you say, feel much more comfortable within the environment that we're in.
So how can we help? What can we do to support our learners? Through the guide that SSHINE's created, we hope that it provides a starting point to start looking at what different things we can do. It has some tips for educators in there, and it's got some case study examples that try to apply the different situations to the kind of things we might be experiencing as learners, and how it might relate to you as educators. Something that's really important about the guide is that it's needs-based. It's structured around needs and not around diagnoses. And this is really important because there is a lot of misunderstanding and stigma. So by addressing it based on the performance component that somebody may be finding difficult, it means that we can more easily find the most appropriate support. So for example, it's got a section where it might be looking at what to consider when somebody has time management difficulties, or has a poor working memory, or is experiencing sensory processing difficulties. Each is individual needs that can be addressed. So rather than saying, you know, what autistic people might need, you're looking at the performance component. And we as SSHINE found that particularly useful, because even though we've all got different combinations of conditions, we found we could each relate to certain aspects of those challenges, and could then share advice around those individual challenges. And felt it just is a bit liberating, moving away from those kind of stereotypical ideas around the conditions, because we're all so very different. So how can you have an impact? We're just going to look a little bit at the initial support, pre-placement support, and things that you can think about as your student is arriving or before they're reaching you. And we're going to just have a brief look at support plans and effective supervision, and then understanding adjustments. So pre-placement visits and pre-placement contact can be a great way of helping your learner understand you and your team. And sorry. So some universities provide opportunities for you to give information about your placement setting. Quite often I go onto our system and I find it blank. So if you can provide information for students about what does your service look like, what do you do, it's a great project that a student you have can make a placement pack that explains about your service and orientation. Receiving that information prior to coming can be really useful. How does your team usually do things? What are your workflows like? If we have that kind of information, we might be able to work out what adjustments we may need in your environment prior to arriving. And it helps us to be able to self-advocate and be proactive around figuring out what we may need. Do you want to say about the clarity around instructions familiar, or shall I carry on?
I think it's exactly the same experience as what Emma's had, where we've not received any notes or guidance on what the service looks like. It's just so important, because it's not only just, it's around reducing that anxiety as well, because there's a lot of anxiety attached with ADHD in particular. and it can be so heightening and cause a lot more adverse effects when you're going into an environment where you don't know how it structurally works, and it really contextualizing it can really be invaluable for that individual. So yeah, just echoing what you said, Emma.
Yeah, and having those discussions early on in the placement around what your expectations are and what the learner's expectations are can be really useful, having really clear conversations around that. So quite often we'll hear from our group that people have been told that they're not showing initiative. So are you explaining to your student what initiative looks like to you and what you expect them to be doing, rather than assuming behaviours? Explain your expectations really clearly and have conversations around how that student might work on meeting them. Also, it's really great at the beginning to find out from your learner what other demands they've got impacting them. Have they got children at home that they're looking after? Have they got another university assessment going on alongside the placement? Because these things can really add to the load of someone who's also managing a neurodivergent condition. So it's good to be aware of what else might be impacting the student. So when in the guidebook, we look at reasonable adjustments in terms of being placement specific, person specific and role specific. The adjustments or support plans that the student might be bringing should really be based on the environment in which your placement setting is, because what somebody might need out in the community might be very different to what they might need in an A&E or in primary care or wherever else your setting is. So some universities have documents that are fluid and enable this environmental response. However, others are quite rigid. So it's quite important to work with the student around what those adjustments might be in your particular placement setting based on their particular needs, and not assumptions based on what worked for somebody else with that similar condition, but really find out from that student what exactly it is that they struggle with or what their approaches are and what they like to do to manage their condition. Students and learners may bring various different documents to you to help them communicate how they do their best work. And there are some documents that we have found particularly useful. So there's something called a one-page profile, which we can send you the links to following this, and something called a Chloe form. They're quite small on the screen here, but essentially they provide a way for the student to explain how they do their best work, some of their interest areas, how you can support them in a way that is kind of strength-based to them and explains how they want to and need to do things. I send my one-page profile before I arrive on placement and have some great feedback, like, oh, it was great to see that before you came. It gave us an idea about you. And we also love it when the practice educators fill one out too, because we want to know how you do your best work. We want to know what your interest areas are in your clinical practice. We want to understand about you as a person, and it really helps break down that power dynamic a bit and create that sense of a shared learning environment together. As well as that, students may have support plans or wellbeing and action plans that they bring along. And as I said before, each university does these very differently. But if a student is bringing you or sending you a support plan, please do take time to sit down with the student, have a look at it together, use it as a starting point to ask questions, have a conversation, and look together at how you're going to have the best time together on this placement. When a student is not supported, it can really impact the well-being and health can suffer. And if supported, it can promote their strengths and work on their weaknesses. So really cultivating that growing and learning environment. feedback and supervision. Yeah, supervision is so important. Millie, go on ahead.
Yeah, no, when we touched on this yesterday, I said for me personally, from my experiences of placement, it's been the most key area throughout the whole of placement that has been so invaluable, because it just enables you and that student to have a protective time and be in a safe environment, and be able to then develop and explore like the challenges and the strengths that that student is presenting, and like work through it together. But it's just such an empowering setting at that time, and I personally just found it very invaluable, and it really supported my learning, but also my journey with exploring, like you say, with my characteristics, how I could best manage them and get the best out of the placement. And also as practice educators, you getting the best out of me or another student. So yeah, it's really invaluable for me.
Yeah, so we can suggest, like, to find out, have a chat with your learner and you, and figure out the best time and way that you want to do supervision, so you're all clear on how that's going to happen. Might you like to send your supervision notes to each other prior and then have time to think about them and then speak about it? Or have you got a fixed time each week that you meet? Work out together what works for you, because that really is the key to making sure that that evolving ongoing support is implemented. It may be that somebody's discovering what they need during your placement. They might not have been in that environment before, and that supervision time provides a way that you can really work together and set goals and work out adjustments, as well as all of the learning things that you're doing. Feedback is a key part of that as well. So giving constructive feedback with key examples. If there is something that's happening around linked to the neurodiversity that you need to work on together, then try and give really clear examples of what you've seen, and ask the student or the learner, how have they noticed this before? Have they got a strategy they use for this sometimes? How do they want to approach it? Work at it together. It can be really distressing when somebody might give you some feedback that's linked to something to do with the neurodiversity that is not in a constructive way, or not related directly to the work you're actually doing. So really do try and bring it into the context of the placement and the role that they're trying to deliver. I don't know, yeah, maybe we can talk more about feedback in the discussions, because I know it can be quite nerve-wracking as well, talking to someone about their neurodivergent condition. And yeah, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts about that too. So we wanted to we're going to close in a second, but we wanted to see whether in the chat or in the discussion afterwards, we might look at together the kinds of adjustments that might help if somebody's experiencing poor working memory, or if somebody becomes overwhelmed in a busy environment, or if somebody experiences like a sudden change to their routine when they need some structure in their routine. I don't know if anyone's got a placement setting where they've experienced these things with a learner and they've got any kind of best practice guidance they want to share. I don't know whether we just will take this to like the discussion and talk about it, or whether anyone wants to kind of pop their hand up and have a go at sharing now. I don't know. What should we do? What's the chat say? So I think, because I don't want to say what I think, because then it doesn't promote the thoughts. So I don't know. Let's see. Let's pick it up in the discussion, and we'll see, and then we'll follow up with what we feel. So hopefully we've covered like just a little snippet of some of the things that are included within SHINE's resource book, and some of the things that are going to be in the e-learning project. So please do feel free to kind of connect with SHINE on email or Twitter, and yeah, we'd love to just hear in the discussion anything around this topic that you guys are wondering about. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think it would be worth looking more at? And just thank you for your presence today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. I think it got lots of intrigue